She screamed, not from pain, not from fear of an intruder. She screamed because she had just realized it had been exactly 10 years since her eyes last closed in peace. 10 years, 3,650 nights. And not one of them, not a single one, had given her rest. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Evelyn Carter's mansion, Lagos was quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes at 3:47 in the morning, when the whole world has surrendered to sleep. Security lights hummed softly across the manicured gardens. The swimming pool shimmered in the dark. Everything around her was still, but Evelyn Carter sat upright in bed, eyes wide open, heart hammering. On the nightstand beside her, 14 different sleeping pills, untouched. The bottles were dusty. She had stopped trying. 3 sleep specialists, 2 neurologists, 1 psychiatrist who charged 40,000 naira per session. They had all said the same thing. There was nothing physically wrong with her. Nothing they could find. "You're perfectly healthy, Mrs. Carter," one doctor had told her, removing his glasses with a quiet sigh. "The body doesn't just refuse to sleep for no reason. Whatever is keeping you awake, it isn't in your brain. It's in your conscience." She had fired him the next day. Because he was right. And that was the one thing she could not afford to face. But on this particular night, the night that would change everything, Evelyn heard a sound she wasn't expecting. The front gate creaked open. She rose slowly from her bed and walked to the window. Below, in the soft glow of the security lights, she saw a man she had never seen before. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with a calm that seemed almost unnatural. He moved slowly, deliberately, like someone who had no reason to rush anywhere. He stopped just inside the gate, set down a small bag, and looked up, directly at her window. Evelyn stepped back from the glass. It was Samuel, the new gateman, and he had just arrived. She didn't know it yet, but in the weeks to come, this quiet, unassuming man would do what no doctor, no pill, no amount of money had ever managed to do. He would make her sleep, but first, she would have to face the truth she had buried 10 years ago. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Evelyn Carter was not born into money. She had built everything herself, every kobo, every property, every share, with a sharpness of mind that made men twice her age nervous in boardrooms. By 42, she owned over 30 properties across Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. Her name was mentioned in the same breath as oil executives and senators. She sat on 2 corporate boards. She had been profiled in Business Day. She was, by every visible measure, untouchable. But the mansion on Victoria Island, the one with 12 bedrooms and a garden she never walked in, had only one occupant, Evelyn, alone. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time, a different life, almost, when the house had felt full. Her husband, Dare, a quiet architect with a warm laugh. Their son, Kolade, 7 years old, the kind of child who collected interesting stones from the garden and named them like they were pets. She had loved that life, fiercely, almost desperately. And then she had destroyed it, not in a dramatic way, not with a single, obvious blow. It happened the way most tragedies happen, quickly, quietly, and in the rain. She never spoke about that night. Not to Dare, not to her sister, not to any of the therapists. The memory lived behind a wall she had built and reinforced over 10 years, and she had decided, absolutely decided, that it would stay there. Except that she couldn't sleep, because every time she closed her eyes, something was waiting for her on the other side of the dark. Samuel had been hired through a domestic staffing agency. His file was unremarkable. Previous employment, a compound in Surulere. References, 2, both solid. Age, 57. Marital status, widower. Children, 1 son. Evelyn's house manager, a brisk woman named Mrs. Adays, had interviewed him for 20 minutes and found nothing unusual. "He's quiet," Mrs. Adays told Evelyn. "Almost too quiet, but his references are clean and he's done this work for 30 years. "Fine," Evelyn said, not looking up from her laptop. "Give him the gatehouse." Samuel moved in on a Tuesday. By Thursday, Evelyn had already noticed something strange. He didn't sleep in the gatehouse at night. Every other gateman she had employed had been invisible after dark, locked in, lights off, the way most people were at 2 or 3 in the morning. But Samuel sat outside, every night, on a small wooden stool just inside the gate, facing the driveway. Not pacing, not distracted, just sitting, watching. The first time Evelyn saw him from her window at 3 a.m., she assumed something was wrong. She called the intercom. "Samuel, why are you outside?" A pause, then his voice, low and unhurried. "I find it easier to be awake at night, Ma. I keep better watch this way." "Are you not tired?" "I am used to it." She had stared at the intercom for a moment, something shifting uncomfortably in her chest. Then she walked back to her bed, lay down, and stared at the ceiling until morning. It was the end of the second week when they had their first real conversation. Evelyn had come downstairs at 2 a.m. to get water from the kitchen, a ritual she had developed over years since there was nothing else to do, and she had walked past the open back door that looked out onto the side garden. Samuel was there, watering a small plant he had placed near the gate. She stopped. "You're watering a plant? At 2 in the morning?" He looked up, unbothered. "It needs water, Ma. The time doesn't change that." She leaned against the door frame. "What kind of plant is that?" "Patience plant," he said simply. "It only grows in shade. People throw it away because it doesn't flower fast, but if you wait long enough—" He paused, touching one of the leaves gently. "It gives the most beautiful thing." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. "Go to bed, Samuel." "With respect, Ma," he said, standing and meeting her eyes with a steadiness that unsettled her. "You should do the same." She left without another word, but she lay in bed that night thinking about patience plants and about things that only grow in the dark. Things began to change in the third week. It started with the humming. Samuel hummed while he worked. Low, rhythmic, repetitive. It wasn't a song Evelyn could name immediately, just a melody that floated up from the driveway in the mornings and drifted through the open windows into the house. On the 4th day of the humming, Evelyn froze in the middle of the hallway. Her hands went cold. She knew that song. It was something her son Khaled used to hum, a lullaby she had sung to him when he was small, an old Yoruba song her own mother had taught her. It was not a song you heard on the radio. It was not a song anyone outside their family should know. She stood at the window and watched Samuel below, her heart slamming against her ribs. He wasn't looking up. He just kept humming, raking the driveway gravel with the same calm he brought to everything. She told herself it was a coincidence. She had to. That night, she couldn't stop herself. She went downstairs at midnight. Samuel was on his stool outside the gate. She walked to the window closest to him and opened it. "Samuel." He looked up immediately, as if he had been waiting. "Where did you learn that song?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, controlled, or as controlled as she could make it. A long pause. "I heard it a long time ago, Ma," he said. "From someone who loved it very much." "Who?" "A boy." His eyes didn't waver. A small boy who hummed it whenever he was afraid. The silence that followed was enormous. Evelyn closed the window slowly, walked back upstairs, sat on the edge of her bed, and for the first time in 10 years, she put her face in her hands and did not know what to do. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comments section. Now it was time. The wall was cracking, and the story behind it would not wait any longer. 10 years ago, Evelyn had been driving home from Abuja. Late. Too late. She had stayed at a business dinner longer than she should have, and the rain had started. The kind of Lagos rain that turns highways into rivers and reduces visibility to almost nothing. She had been in a hurry. She always was. The boy came out of nowhere. One moment the road was clear. The next, there was a small figure. A child, she realized, with horror, stepping off the sidewalk in the dark and the rain. She hit the brakes. She felt the impact. It was not violent. It was not cinematic. It was a quiet, sickening thud. And then the car had stopped, and the rain was hammering the roof. And she sat there, shaking, unable to breathe. She opened the door. She stepped out into the rain. She saw the child, a boy, maybe 7 or 8, lying on the wet road, unmoving but breathing. She could see his chest rising and falling. He was alive. And then, God help her. She looked around. The road was empty. No witnesses, no other cars. The rain was too heavy, the night too dark. No one had seen. She told herself she would call for help. She told herself someone else would come. She told herself the boy was breathing, that he was fine, that she could call an ambulance anonymously, that she could not afford a scandal, that her career, her marriage, her reputation. She got back in the car. She drove away. She never called. And 3 months later, she could no longer close her eyes. In the days that followed the conversation about the song, Samuel began to tell her stories. It started one evening when Evelyn found him sitting near the garden. She had been going to ignore him, to walk back inside, but something in the way he was sitting made her pause. He looked like a man who had been waiting his whole life to say something. "May I tell you something, Ma?" he asked. She sat down on the garden bench. She didn't know why. "Go ahead." "There was a woman," he began, in his unhurried way, "who lived near the highway. A good woman, hard-working. She had one son, her only child. And one rainy night, her son left the house to buy medicine for her because she was sick. He was a child. He should not have gone alone. But he was brave, and he loved her." Evelyn stared at the garden, perfectly still. "He was hit by a car," Samuel continued, his voice never rising, never breaking. "The driver stopped briefly, and then left him in the rain. A mechanic found the boy 2 hours later and rushed him to the hospital. He survived, but the damage to his leg was serious. He walked with a limp for years." The silence between them was thick as concrete. "What happened to the driver?" Evelyn asked, barely above a whisper. "Nothing," Samuel said simply. "No one found her. She went on with her life." He looked at Evelyn steadily. "But I wonder sometimes, did she go on, or did she just keep moving?" Evelyn stood up abruptly. "I have work to do," she said. "Of course, Ma." He didn't move. "Sleep well." She was halfway to the door before she realized she was shaking. The next evening, without either of them planning it, she found herself in the garden again. And again. He told a story. "There was a man," Samuel said, "who found an injured child in the rain. He carried him to the hospital on his back because he had no car. He sat in that hospital for 2 days without eating because the boy had no family present and he could not bear to leave him alone." "Who was this man?" Evelyn asked. Her voice was carefully flat. "A mechanic. A nobody, some people would say. A man with nothing but his hands and his conscience." Samuel's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in his composure she had ever seen. He gave what little he had because a child was in pain. He never received a thank you, not even from the hospital. "And the boy," Evelyn pressed. She was leaning forward now, against her will. "The boy survived, grew up, became a good man." A pause. "But the mechanic, that man never forgot that night. Not a single detail. Not the rain, not the empty road, not—" He paused. The sound of a car driving away. Evelyn couldn't speak. "I should go inside," she finally managed. "Yes, Ma." And then, quietly, almost to himself, "You left him in the rain." She stopped walking. She didn't turn around. She couldn't. What did you just say? Silence. She turned. Samuel was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on another human face before. Not anger, not accusation, but something closer to sorrow. Old sorrow. The kind that had been carried for years. Who are you? Her voice broke on the last word. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked away. Get some rest, Ma, he said softly. We'll talk when you're ready. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the darkest chair in her living room, in the dark, and she let the memories come, every single one of them. The rain, the thud, the small body on the road, his breathing. Yes, he had been breathing. She had seen it. She had chosen to see it as permission to leave, and she had left him there, a 7-year-old boy, alone in a rainstorm on a Lagos highway, and she had driven away, and she had never, not once, gone back. By 5 a.m., when the first pale light began to appear behind the curtains, Evelyn Carter had made a decision. She would face it. She went to the gate. Samuel was there, on his stool. He looked up as she approached and showed no surprise whatsoever. Tell me the truth, she said. All of it, right now. He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded once. I was the mechanic. His voice was low, steady. I found a boy, lying on Airport Road 10 years ago. It was a Friday night. The rain was very heavy. I was driving home from a job and my headlights caught him. He paused. I stopped. I carried him. I took him to lay Sooth on my back because my own car had broken down 50 meters away, and I had no money for an Okada. Evelyn's legs felt like they belonged to someone else. You said it was your boy. I misspoke, but his eyes said something different. Samuel. Her voice was barely sound. Who was the boy? He reached into the chest pocket of his uniform. He produced a photograph, old and slightly creased, and he held it out to her. She took it with trembling hands. In the photograph, a teenage boy stood smiling in front of a small house. He had a slight lean to his right side. His left leg was turned inward just fractionally, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking. But Evelyn saw it immediately. She looked up at Samuel. He survived, Samuel said. He grew up. He is 20 years old now. A pause, weighted with a decade of everything he had carried, and I raised him. Because no one else came, because his own mother had died that same year, not from the accident, but from grief and sickness both. Because that child needed someone to stay. He didn't die, Evelyn breathed. It was not a question. It was something she was saying to herself, something she had been terrified to know for 10 years. He did not die, Samuel confirmed. But you didn't know that, and not knowing, you chose not to find out. The words landed like a slap, not cruel, just precise. True. Why are you here? She asked. Why did? For everything she could offer. But when she saw him, a young man, tall and unhurried, with a slight lean to his walk and his father's same steady eyes, every prepared word, RAA, fell apart. I'm sorry, she said. That was all that came out. I am so deeply sorry. Emeka looked at her for a long moment. He wasn't angry. That was the thing that undid her completely. He wasn't angry. My father told me about you, he said. He said you had the kind of guilt that never lets you rest. He was right? Yes. 10 years, he said quietly. You gave yourself a 10-year sentence for something I healed from in 2. She couldn't speak. I'm not here for your money, he continued. His voice was gentle but immovable. I have a life. I have a father who loves me. I study architecture. Did you know that? I want to design affordable housing. He smiled slightly. I don't need a trust fund. I just needed you to admit the truth. To yourself, mostly. That night, Evelyn said, forcing herself to say it clearly, I made a choice that I will regret for the rest of my life. I saw you were alive, and I drove away. Yes, I was afraid. I know. That doesn't make it right. No, Emeka said. It doesn't, but it makes you human. He paused. And humans can be forgiven, if they're willing to stop running. Samuel stayed on for one more week after that. He didn't say much. He never said much. But in the evenings, he would sometimes leave a cup of warm tea just inside the back door for Evelyn, without comment. She started drinking it. She started sitting in the garden in the evenings. She started being still. On the last night before Samuel left, he came to say goodbye. Evelyn stood at the gate, and she realized, looking at this quiet, extraordinary man, that she did not have words adequate to what he had done. You could have gone to the police, she said. 10 years ago. You could have reported it. Yes. Why didn't you? He considered this for a moment. Because putting you in a cell wouldn't have healed the boy, and because... He looked at her. I believe that guilt, if it was real, would eventually find its own way to do what punishment couldn't. Did you always plan to come here? When Emeka was 18, he asked me to find out if you were still carrying it. I found you. I watched from a distance for a while. Then I applied for the job. A small, quiet, almost smile. The agency never asked many questions. How did you know where I lived? Madam, he said gently, your name is in the newspapers. You are not difficult to find. She laughed. It surprised her, the sound of it. She hadn't heard herself laugh in years. Samuel nodded once, picked up his small bag, and walked out through the gate. That night, Evelyn Carter lay down in her bed. She turned off the light. She closed her eyes. She waited for the darkness to fill with what it always filled with. The rain, the road, the small body, the shame. But this time, what came instead was a different image. A young man, smiling in a photograph, leaning slightly to one side, studying architecture, wanting to build homes for people who needed them. She breathed in. She breathed out. And for the first time in 10 years, for the first time in 3,650 nights, Evelyn Carter fell asleep. There is a kind of suffering that no money can cure, no doctor can diagnose, and no pill can touch. It is the suffering of a conscience that knows what it did. It keeps you awake not to punish you, but to wait. To wait for the moment you decide that the truth, however frightening, is better than the lie you've been living inside. Evelyn Carter built an empire. She had power and influence and wealth beyond what most people will ever know, and none of it, not 1 cent of it, could buy her a single hour of peace. But one quiet man, with a small wooden stool and a patience plant and a story told over, several evenings in a garden, he gave her back the one thing she had lost. Not because he forgave her, but because he helped her stop running long enough to forgive herself. Peace doesn't come from wealth. It comes from truth. And truth, real truth, is always waiting. Patient as a plant that only blooms in the shade. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be avoided. It will wait 10 years if it has to. If you were behind that wheel that night, would you have stopped? And do you believe that guilt can follow a person forever? Or does truth always, eventually, set us free? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of something you've been carrying, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Click the like button if you watched all the way to the end. We'll see you in the next one.